How to Teach English by Jeremy Harmer. Second copyright in 2007. Printed in China. Reading by Shaima Aziz. This is for the student that readers of this book may teach, but most especially for Tani and Jessie. Contents: acknowledgement and introduction. Do we have many parts in this book? 1. Learners. 2. Teachers. 3. Managing the classroom. 4. Describing learning and teaching. 5. Describing language. 6. Teaching the language system. 7. Teaching reading. 8. Teaching writing. 9. Teaching speaking. 10. Teaching listening. 11. Using chorus books. 12. Planning lessons. 13. Testing. 14. What if. And we have appendices. Appendix A. Classroom equipment, classroom technology. Appendix B. Useful organization and websites. Appendix C. Chapter notice and further reading. Appendix D. Phonemic symbols. Introduction to this book. A friend of mine who is an orchestral conductor was asking me early in our acquaintance about what I did for a living. When I told him that apart from other activities, I wrote books about how to teach English, he said, "Books in the plural, surely. Once you have written one, there is nothing more to say." I wanted to reply that he had just argued himself out of a job. I mean, how many performances of Beethoven symphonies have there been in the 21st century alone? But someone else laughed at his question. Another musician made a different comment. The conversation moved on, and so Martin, the conductor's flippant inquiry, evaporated in the convivial atmosphere of a British pub. But his question was a good one. Surely we know how to teach English and language. After all, people have been doing it successfully for 2000 years or more, and some aspects of teaching in the past have probably not changed that much, but other things have and continue to change, which is, I suppose, why every time I examine past assumptions about teaching, I find myself questioning and reinterpreting things I thought were fixed. And of course, I am not alone in this. We all do it all the time, or at last we do if we haven't closed our minds off from the possibility of change and renewal. Language teaching purpose more than many other activities reflects the time it takes place in. Language is about communication, after all, and purpose. That is why philosophies and technologies for learning language seem to develop and change in turn with the societies which give rise to them. Teaching and learning are very human activities. They are social just as much as they are, in our case, linguistic. But it is not just society that changes and evolves. The last decade have seen what feels like unprecedented technological change. The internet has seen to that, and another educational technology has not lagged behind. New software and hardware has appeared which we could hardly have imagined possible when the first edition of How to Teach English was published as recently as 1998. And it is exciting stuff. There are so many wonderful possibilities open to us now, not least the ability to write and edit books electronically. I have tried to reflect that excitement and newness in parts of this new edition, but we need to be careful too. In the words of Barnes Greenfield, speaking in Britain House of Lords, we must choose to adopt appropriate technologies that will ensure that classroom will fit the child, and buck the growing trend for technologies to be used to make the 21st century child fit the classroom. But finally, there is the sheer joy and frustration and disbelief, and in the words of the playwright Dennis Porter, tender contempt you experience when you look again at what you wrote a few years back. The challenge is to see in the light of what has happened, what has been said, and what has been written, the things that need to be changed, excite or added to. Readers of the first version of How to Teach English will notice a change of chapter order and see a new chapter to introduce the subject of testing. There are new materials and techniques on offer, and quite a few old ones too, because they have stood the test of time. There is a more up to date set or reference at the end of the book, and a glossary to help new teachers through part of the mighty jargon swamp that our profession generates, just like any other. And so I want to say to my conductor friend, thank heavens for new developments, new technologies, and new interpretation. They keep us alive. They make us better teachers. We shall not, of course, case from exploration in T.S. Eliot's famous words, but even if we do end up back where we started, the journey is all. Part 1. Learners. We have 5 points in part 1. 1 point, reason for learning and different contexts for learning, and learner differences, the importance of student motivation, responsibility for learning. Reasons for learning. All around the world, students of all ages are learning to speak English, but their reason for wanting to study English can differ greatly. Some students, of course, only learn English because it is on the curriculum at primary or secondary level, but for others, studying the language reflects some kind of a choice. Many people learn English because they have moved into a target language community, and they need to be able to operate successfully within the community. A target language community is a place where English is the national language, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, etc., or where it is one of the main languages of culture and comeric, e.g. India, Pakistan, Nigeria. For example, some students need English for a specific purpose, ESP. Such students of ESP, sometimes also called English for special purpose, may need to learn legal language or the language of tourism, banking, or nursing. For example, an extremely purple start of ESP in the teaching of business English, where students learn about how to operate in English in the business world. Many students need English for academic purpose, EAP, in order to study at an English-speaking university or college, or because they need to access English language academic texts. Many people learn English because they think it will be useful in some way for international communication and travel. Such students of general English often do not have a particular reason for going to English classes, but simply wish to learn to speak and read and write the language effectively for whenever and wherever this might be useful for them. The purpose students have for learning will have an effect on what it is they want and need to learn, and as a result will influence what they are taught. Business English students, for example, will want to spend a lot of time concentrating on the language needed for specific business transactions and situations. Students living in a target language community will need to use English to achieve their immediate practical and social needs. A group of nerds will want to study the kind of English that they are likely to have to use while they nurse. Students of general English, including those studying the language as part of their primary and secondary education, will not have such specific needs. Of course, and so their lessons and the materials which the teachers use will almost certainly look different from those for students with more clearly identifiable needs. Consideration of our students' different reasons for learning is just one of many different learners' variables, as well shall see below. Point 2. Different contexts for learning. English is learned and taught in many different contexts and in many different class arrangements. Such differences will have a considerable effect on how and what it is we teach. EFL and ESL and ESRL. For many years we have made a distinction between people who study English as a foreign language and those who study it as a second or other language. It has been suggested that students of EFL, English as a foreign language, tend to be learning so that they can use English when traveling or to communicate with other people from whatever country who also speak English. ESL, English as a second language student, on the other hand, are usually living in the target language community. The latter many need to learn the particular language variety of the community, Scottish English, Southern English from England, Australian English, Texan English, for example. Rather than a more general language variety, see page 79 in this book. They may need to combine their learning of English with knowledge of how to do things in the target language community, such as going to a bank, retaining a flat, accessing health services, for example. The English they learn, therefore, many differ from that studied by EFL students, whose needs are not so specific to a particular time and place. However, this distinction began to look less satisfactory when we look at the way people use English in a global context. The use of English for international communication, especially with the Internet, means that many EFL students are in effect living in a global target language community, and so might be thought of as ESL students. Instead, partly as a result of this, we now tend to use the term ESOL, English for speakers of other language, to describe both situations. Nevertheless, the context in which the language is learned, what community they wish to be part of, is still of considerable relevance to the kind of English they will want and need to study, and the skill they will need to acquire. Schools and language schools. A huge number of students learn English in primary and secondary classrooms around the world. They have not chosen to do this themselves, but learn because English is on the curriculum, depending on the country, area, and the school itself. They may have the advantage of the latest classroom equipment and information technology (IT), or they may, as in many parts of the world, be sitting in rows in classroom with a blackboards and no other teaching aid. Private language schools, on the other hand, tend to be better equipped than some government schools, though this is not always the case. They will frequently have smaller class size, and certainly the students in them may well have chosen to come and study. This will affect their motivation at the beginning of the process, in page 20 in this book. Large classes and one-to-one teaching. Some students prefer to have a private session with just them on their own and a teacher. This is commonly referred to as one-to-one teaching. At the other end of the scale, English is taught in some environment to group of over 100 students at a time. Government school class in many countries have up to 30 students, whereas a typical number in a private language school lies somewhere between 8 and 15 learners. Clearly, the size of the class will affect how we teach, peer work, and group work. are often used in large classes to give students more chance for interaction than they would otherwise get with while class teaching. In a one-to-one setting, the teacher is able to tailor to the lesson to an individual specific needs, whereas with larger groups, compromises have to be reached between the group and the individual within it. In large classes, the teacher will teach from the front more often than with smaller groups, where mingling with students when they work in pairs, for example, may be much more feasible and time efficient. In school and in company, the vast majority of language classes in the world take place in educational institutions such as the schools and language schools we have already mentioned, and in addition, college and universities. In such situation, teachers have to be aware of school policy and conform to syllabus and curriculum. Decision taken by whoever is responsible for the academic running of the school. Their money will be learning which students are expected to achieve, and students may be preparing for specific exams. A number of companies also offer language classes and expect teachers to go to the company office or factory to teach. Here, the classroom may not be quite as appropriate as those which are specially designed for teaching and learning, but more importantly, the teacher may need to negotiate the class content not only with the student, but also with whoever is paying for the tuition. Real and virtual learning environments. Language learning has traditionally involved a teacher and a student or students being in the same physical space. However, the development of high-speed internet access has helped to bring about new virtual learning environments in which students can learn even when they are literally thousands of miles away and in a different time zone from a teacher or other classmates. Some of the issues for both real and virtual learning environments are the same. Students still need to be motivated, and we still need to offer help in that area. As a result, the best virtual learning sites have online tutors who interacted with their students via email or online chat forums. It is also possible to create groups of students who are all following the same online programs and who can therefore talk to each other in the same way. For example, electronically. But despite this interpersonal element, some students find it more difficult to sustain their motivation online than they might as part of a real learning groups. Virtual learning is Virtual learning is significantly different from face-to-face classes for a number of reasons. First, the student can attend lessons when they want, for the most part through real-time chat. Forms have to be scheduled rather than when lessons are timetabled as in schools. Secondly, it no longer matters where the students are assigned. They can log on from any location in the world. Online learning may have this advantage, but some of the benefits of real learning environments are less easy to replicate electronically. This includes the physical reality for having teachers and students around you when you are learning, so that you can see their expression and get message from their gestures, tone of voice. For example, many learners will prefer the presence of real people to the sight of a screen, with or without pictures and video. Some communication software such as MSN Message and Skype allows users to see each other on the screen as they communicate, but this is still less attractive and considerably more jerky than being face to face with the teachers and fellow students. Of course, whereas in real learning environments, learning can take place with very little technical equipment. Virtual learning relies on good hardware and software and effective and reliable internet connection. Although this book will certainly look at use for the internet and other IT applications, it is not primarily concerned with the virtual learning environment, preferring instead to concentrate on situations when the teachers and learners are usually in the same place at the same time. Point 3. Learner differences. Whatever their reasons for learning or the circumstances in which it takes place, it is sometimes tempting to see all students as being more or less the same. Yet there are marked differences not only in terms of their age and level, but also in terms of different individual abilities, knowledge and preferences. We will examine some of this difference in this section. Age. Learners are often described as children, young learners, adult, second, adolescent, young adult or adults. Within education, the term children is generally used for learners between the age of about 2 to about 14. Students are generally described as young learners between the age of about 5 to 9, and very young learners are usually between 2 and 5. At what age it is safe to call students adolescent is often adults is bound up with physical and emotional change rather than chronological age. However, this term tends to refer to students from the age of about 12 to 17. whereas young adults are generally thought to be between 16 and 20. We will look at their age: children, adult, and adolescents. However, we need to remember that there is a large degree of individual variation in the way in which different children develop. The description that follow, therefore, must be seen as generalization only. Children. We know that children don't just focus on what is being taught, but also learn all sorts of other things at the same time, taking information from whatever is going on around them. We know that seeing, hearing, and touching are just as important for understanding the teacher's explanation. We are conscious too that the abstraction of, say grammar rules will be less effective the younger the students are, but we also know that children respond well to individual attention from the teachers and are usually pleased to receive teachers' approval. Children usually respond well to activity that focus on their lives and experience but a child's attention span, their willingness to stay rooted in one activity, is often fairly a circle characteristic of young children is their ability to become competent speakers of a new language with remarkable facility, provided they get enough exposure to it. They forget language, it seems, with equal ease. This language acquiring ability is steadily compromised as they head towards adolescence. One of the greatest differences between adolescents and young children is that these older children have developed a greater capacity for abstract thought as they have grown up. In other words, their intellect are kicking in, and they can talk about more abstract ideas, testing out concept in a way that younger children find difficult. Many adolescents readily understand and accept the need for learning of a more intellectual type. At their best, adolescent students have a great capacity for learning, enormous potential for creative thought, and a passionate commitment to things which interest them. Adolescence is bound up with a search for identity and a need for self-esteem. This is often the result of the student's position within their peer group rather than being the consequence of teacher approval. Adults. Older learners often, but not always, have a wider range of life experience to draw on, both as individuals as learners, than younger students do. They are often more disciplined than adolescents and apply themselves to take the task of learning, even when it seems fairly boring. They often have a clear understanding of why they are learning things and can't sustain their motivation. By perceiving and holding on to long-term learning goals. On the other hand, adult learners come with a lot of previous learning experience, which may hamper their progress. Students who have had negative learning experience in the past may be nervous of new learning. Students use it to failure may be consciously or subconsciously prepared for more failure. Older students who have got out of the habit of study may find classroom daunting place. They may also have strong views about teaching methods from their past, which the teacher will have to make into account. Because students at different age have different characteristics, the way we teach them will differ too. With younger children, we may offer a greater variety of games, songs, and puzzles than we would do with older students. We may want to ensure that there are more frequent change of activity. With a group of older adolescents, will we try to keep in mind the importance of a student's place within his or her peer groups and take special care when correcting or assigning roles within an activity ethic. Our choice of topic will reflect their emerging interests. One of the recurring nightmares for teachers of adolescents in particular is that we might lose control of the class. We worry about lessons that slip away from us and which we can't manage because the students don't like the subject, each other, the teacher or the school, or sometimes just because they feel like misbehaving, or because issues in their life outside the classroom are affecting their behavior and outlook on life. Yet teenagers are not the only students who sometimes exhibit problem behavior, that is, behavior which causes a problem for the teacher, the student is him or himself and herself, and perhaps the other in the classroom. Younger children can, of course, cause difficulties for the teacher and classes too. Adults can also be disruptive and exciting. They may not to do it in the same way as younger learners, but teachers of adults can experience a range of behaviors such as students who resist the teacher's attempts to focus their attention on the topic of the lesson and spend the lesson talking to their neighbors, or who disagree vocally with much of what the teacher or their classmates are saying. They may arrive late for class or fail to do any homework, and whatever the cause of this behavior, a problem is created. Teachers need to work both to prevent problem behavior and to respond to do it opportunely if it occurs. We will discuss how the teacher's behavior can inspire the student's confidence and cooperation, and we will discuss what to do if students exhibit problem behavior. Learning style. All students respond to various stimuli such as pictures, sound, music, movement, for example, but for most of them, and as same things stimulate them into learning more than other things do. The neuro-linguistic programming model, often called NLP, take account of this by showing how some students are especially influenced by visual stimuli and are therefore likely to remember things better if they see them. Some students, on the other hand, are especially affected by auditory input and as a result respond very well to things they hear. Kinesthetic activity is especially effective for other learners who see their to learn best when they are involved in some kind of physical activity, such as moving around or rearranging things with their hands. The point is that although we all respond to all of these stimuli, for most of us, one or other of them, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, is more powerful than the other in enable us to learn and remember what we have learned. Another way of looking at student variation is offered by the concept of multiple intelligences, first articulated by Howard Gardner in this formulation, and that of people who have followed and expanded his theories. We all have a number of different intelligent, mathematical, musical, interpersonal, spiritual, emotional, for example. However, while one person's mathematical intelligence might be highly developed, their interpersonal intelligence, the ability to interact with and relate to other people, might be less advanced, whereas another person might have good spiritual awareness and musical intelligence, but might be weak mathematically. Thus, it is inappropriate to describe someone as being intelligent or under an intelligence, because while we may not have much of a knack for, say, music, that does not mean our abilities are similarly limited in other areas. What these two theories tell us from their different standpoints is that in any one classroom we have a number of different individuals with different learning style and preference. Experienced teachers know this and try to ensure that different learning styles are created for as often as is possible. In effect, this means offering a wide range of different activity types in our lesson in order to cater for individual different and needs. Nevertheless, we need to find out whether there are any generalizations which will help us to encourage habits in students which will help all of them. We might say, for example, that homework is good for everyone, and so is reading for pleasure. Certain activities, such as many of the speaking activities in chapter 9 in this book, and good for all the students in the class through the way we organize them and the precise things we ask students to do may vary for exactly the reasons we have been discussing. Levels. Teachers of English generally make their three basic distinctions to categorize their language knowledge of their students: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Broadly speaking, beginners are those who don't know any English, and advanced students are those whose level of English is competent. allowing them to read unsimplified factual and fictional texts and communicate fluently. Between these two extremes, intermediate suggests a basic competence in speaking and writing and a ability to comprehend fairly, straightforward listening and reading. However, as well shall see, these are rote and ready labels whose exact meaning can vary from institution to institution. Other descriptive terms are also used in an attempt to be more specific about exactly what kind of beginners and intermediate or advanced students we are talking about. A distinction is made between beginners, students who start a beginner's course having heard virtually on English, and false beginners to reflect the fact that the latter can't really use it in English, but actually know quite a lot which can be quickly activated. They are not real beginners. Elementary students are no longer beginners and are able to communicate in a basic way. They can string some sentences together, construct a simple story, or take part in simple spoken interaction. Pre-intermediate students have not yet achieved intermediate competence, which involves greater fluency and general comprehension of some general authentic English. However, they have come across most of the basic structures and lexes of the language. Upper intermediate students, on the other hand, have the competence of intermediate students plus an extended knowledge of grammatical construction and skill use. However, they may not have achieved the accuracy or depth of knowledge which their advanced colleges have acquired, and as a result are less able to operate at different level of subtlety. In recent years, the Council of Europe and the Association of Language Testers of Europe (ALTE) have been working to define language competency levels for learners of a number of different languages. The result of this is the Common European Framework, a document setting out in detail what students can do at various levels, and a series of ALTE levels ranging from A1, roughly equivalent to the elementary level, to C2, very advanced. The following diagram shows the different levels in sequence: beginners, false beginners, and A1 for A2 elementary. After A2, pre-intermediate, B1 intermediate, and B2 for C1 appear intermediate. After C1, C2 advanced. This is terms for different students level and ALTE levels. What do this level mean in particular for the students? in practice for the students. If they are at level B1, for example, how can their abilities be described? ILT has produced can-do statements to try to make this clear. As the example on the skill of writing demonstrate. ILTE levels and can-do statements alongside the more traditional terms we have mentioned are being used increasingly by coursebook write and curriculum designer, not only in Europe but across much of the language learning world. If we remind ourselves that terms such as beginner and intermediate are rough guides only. In other words, unlike the ILTE levels, they do not say exactly what the students can do. Then we are in a position to make broad generalization about the different levels. Beginners. Success is easy to see at this level and easy for the teacher to arrange, but then so is failure. Some adult beginners find the language learning is more stressful than they expected and reactively give up. However, if things are going well, teaching beginners can be incredibly stimulating. The pleasure of being able to see our part in our students' success is invigorating. Intermediate students. Success is less obvious at intermediate level. Intermediate students have already achieved a lot, but they are less likely to be able to recognize and almost daily progress. On the contrary, it may sometimes seem to them that they don't improve that much or that fast anymore. We often call this the plateau effect, and the teachers has to make strenuous attempt to show students what they still need to learn without being disorganized. One of the ways of doing this is to make the tasks we give them more challenging and to get them to analyze language more thoroughly. We need to help them set clear goals for themselves so that they have something to measure their achievement by. Advanced students. Students at this level already know a lot of English. There is still the danger of the plateau effect, even if the plateau itself is higher up. So we have to create a classroom culture where students understand what still has to be done. And we need to provide good, clear evidence of progress. We can do this through a concentration not so much on grammatical accuracy, but on style and preparation of, for example, appropriately using the right language in the right situation, connection whether words have a negative or positive tone. For example, an inference how we can read behind the words to get a writer's true meaning. In these areas, we can enable students to use language with more subtlety. It is also at this level especially that we have to encourage students to take more and more responsibility for their own learning, although many activities can clearly be used at more than one level. Designing newspaper for front page, writing radio commercials, for example. Others are not so universally appropriate. With beginners, for example, we will not suggest abstract discussions or the writing of descriptive essay. For advanced students, a drill where students repeat in chorus and individually. Focusing on simple past tense question will almost certainly be inappropriate. Where a simple role play with ordinary information question: what time does the next train to London level? What is the platform for the London train, for example, may be a good target for beginners to aim at. The focus for advanced students will have to be richer and more suitable. For example, what is the best way to persuade someone of your opinion in an argument? How can we structure writing to hold the reader's attention? What different devices do English speakers use to give emphasis to the bit of information they want you to notice? Another obvious difference in the way we teach different levels in language. Beginners need to be exposed to fairly simple grammar and vocabulary which they can understand. In their language work, they may get pleasure and good learning from concentrating on straightforward questions like what is your name? What is your telephone number? Hello, goodbye, for example. Intermediate students know all the language already, and so we will not ask them to concentrate on it. The level of language also affected the teacher's behavior at beginner's level. The need for us to rough turn or our speech is very great. We can exaggerate our voice tone and use gesture to help us to get our meaning across, but at higher level such extreme behavior is not so important. Indeed, it will probably come across to the students as patronizing. At all levels, teachers need to ascertain what students know before deciding what to focus on. At higher levels, we can use what the students already know as the basis for our works. At lower levels, we will, for example, always try to elicit the language, that is, try to get the language from the students rather than giving it to them. We are going to focus on that way we know whether to continue with our plan or whether to amend it at then and 3. There because students perhaps know more than we expect. Educational and cultural background. We have already discussed how students at different age present different characters in the classroom. Another aspect of individual variation lies in the student cultural and educational background. Some children come from homes where education is highly valued and where parental help is readily available. Other children, however, may come from less supportive background, where no such backup is on offer. Older students, especially adults, may come from a variety of background and, as a result, have very different expectation of what teaching and learning involves. Where students have different cultural background from the teacher or from each other, they may feel differently from their classmates about topics in the curriculum. They may have different responses to classroom practice from the one the teacher expected or the ones which the right of the course book. They are using had anticipated in some educational culture. For example, students are expected to be articulate and question, or even challenge their teachers, whereas in other, the students' competence and modesty and more highly praised. Some educational cultures find learning by rote. Memorizing facts and figures more attractive than learning by doing, where students are involved in project work and experimentation in order to arrive at knowledge. And it is worth remembering that even where students all live in the same town or area, it is often the case that they come from a variety of cultural backgrounds. In many English-speaking countries such as Britain, the US, Australia, for example, multilingual classes where students come from different countries and therefore have different mother tongues are the norms, especially in private language schools. As a result, students are likely to represent a range of educational and cultural backgrounds. As teachers, we need to be sensitive to this different background. We need to be able to explain what we are doing and why. We need to use material, offer topic and employ teaching techniques which even when engaging and challenging, will not offend anyone in the group. Where possible, we need to be able to offer different material, topic and teaching techniques at different times to suit the different individual expectations and testers. The importance of student motivation. A variety of factors can create a desire to learn. Perhaps the learners love the subject they have chosen, or maybe they are simply interested in seeing what it is like. Perhaps, as with young children, they just happen to be curious about everything, including learning. Some students have a particular reason for their study. They want to learn an instrument so they can play in an orchestra, learn English so they can watch American TV or understand manuals written in English. Study TIICHI so that they can become fitter and more relaxed, or go to cookery classes so that they can prepare better meals. This desire to achieve some goals is the bedrock of motivation, and if it is strong enough, it provokes a decision to act. For an adult, this may involve enrolling in an English class. For a teenager, it may be choosing one subject over another for special study. This kind of motivation, which comes from outside the classroom and may be influenced by a number of external factors such as the attitude of society, family, and peers to the subject in question, is often referred to as extrinsic motivation, the motivation that students bring into the classroom from outside. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is the kind of motivation that is generated by what happens inside the classroom. This could be the teacher's methods, the activities that students take part in, or their perception of their success or failure. The activities that students take part into, or the success or failure. While it may be relatively easy to be extrinsically motivated, that is to have a desire to do something, sustaining that motivation can be more problematic. As a student, we can become bored, or we may find the subject more difficult than we thought it was going to be. One of the teacher's main aims should be to help students to sustain their motivation. We can do this in a number of ways. The activities we ask students to take part in will, if they involve the students or excite their curiosity and provoke their participation, help them to stay interested in the subject. We need as well to select an appropriate level of challenge so that things are neither too difficult nor too easy. We need to display appropriate teacher qualities so that students can have confidence in our abilities and professionalism. See Chapter 2 in this book. We need to consider the issue of effects, that is, how the students feel about the learning process. Students need to feel that the teachers really cares about them. If students feel supported and valued, they are far more likely to be motivated to learn. One way of helping students to sustain their motivation is to give them, as far as is feasible, some agency, a term borrowed from the social science, which means that students should take some responsibility for themselves and that they should, like that agent of a passive sentence, be the doors in class. This means that they will have some decision-making power, purpose, over the choice of which activity to do next, or how they want to be corrected. For example, if students feel they have some influence over what is happening, rather than always being told exactly what to do, they are often more motivated to take part in the lesson. But however much we do to foster and sustain students' motivation, we can only, in the end, encourage by word and deed. Offering our support and guidance. Real motivation comes from within each individual, from the students themselves. Responsibility for learning. If giving students agency is seen as a key component in sustaining motivation, then such agency is not just about giving students more decision-making power. It is also about encouraging them to take more responsibility for their own learning. We need to tell them that unless they are prepared to take some of the strain, their learning is likely to be less successful than if they themselves become active learners, rather than passive recipients of teaching. This message may be difficult from some students from certain educational backgrounds and cultures who have been led to believe that it is the teacher's job to provide learning. In such cases, teachers will not be successful if they merely try to impose a pattern of learning autonomy. Instead of imposing autonomy, therefore, we need to gradually extend the student's role in learning. At first, we will expect them, for example, to make their own dialogues after they have listened to a model on an audio track. Such standard getting students to try out new language is one small way of encouraging students' involvement in learning. We might go on try to get individual students to investigate a grammar issue or solve a reading puzzles on their own, rather than having things explained to them by the teacher. We might get them to look for the meaning of words and how they are used in their dictionaries. See below, rather than telling them what the words mean. As students get used to working things out from themselves and or doing work at home, so they can gradually start to become more autonomous. Getting students to do various kinds of homework, such as written exercises, composition, or further study is one of the best ways to encourage student autonomy. What is important is that teachers should choose the right kind of task from the students. It should be within their grasp and not take up too much of their time or occupy too little of it by being trivial. Even more importantly than this, teachers should follow up homework when they say they are going to imposing that same deadline upon themselves as they do on their students. Other way of promoting a student's self-reliance include having them read for pleasure in their own time and find their own resources for language practice in books on the internet, for example, or on internet. Apart from homework, teachers will help students to become autonomous if they encourage them to use monolingual learners' dictionaries written only in English but which are designed especially from learners and then help them to understand how and when to use them. At earlier stage of learning, good bilingual dictionaries serve the same function and allow the students a large measure of independence from their teachers. We will help students to be responsible for their learning if we show them where, either in books, in self-access centers, or online, they can continue studying outside the classroom. For example, we can point them in the direction of our suitable website if they have computer access or recommended good CD or DVD resources. If students are lucky, their institution will have a self-access center with a range of resources comprising books, including readers. In this book, see page 100, newspaper, magazine, worksheet, listening material, video and DVD, and computer with access to the internet. Students can decide if and when to visit such centers and what they want to do there. Self-access centers should help students to make appropriate choice by having good cataloging system and ensuring that people are on hand to help students find their way around. However, the objective of a self-access center is the students should themselves take responsibility for what they do and make their own discussion about what it is most appropriate for them. Of course, many schools do not have self-access centers, and even where they do, many students do not make full use of them. This is because not all students, as well as we have said, are equally capable of being or waiting to be autonomous learners. Despite this fact, we should do our best to encourage them to have agency without forcing it upon them. Conclusion. In this chapter we have 5 points. One of them discusses different reasons for learning, including students living in a target language community or studying English for specific or academic purpose, or because they want to improve their English generally. Point 2. Look at different learning contexts, including English as a foreign or second language. Now, both generally called English for speakers of other language, the world of school and language schools, different class size, in-company teaching and virtual learning via information technology. Point 3. Detail student differences in age, learning style, language level and cultural educational background, and how we should cater for such differences. Point 4. Talked about the importance of motivation and how to foster it. Point 5. Discussed the students' responsibility for their own learning and how we can encourage this.